Governor Ford has called out the National Guard to maintain order. They will not act as segregationists or integrationists.
Brown v. Board was enacted over 65 years ago, and we still have deep inequity in public education. We've been failed. One child has access to world language, robotics labs, after-school programs, teacher aides, smaller class sizes. But then another child who's Black or brown has overcrowded classrooms, no teacher aides in the building, no world language. They get test drill, and so they don't get inspired. And that's what education is, man. Education is inspiration and information that prepare children to impact the world.
The number one predictor of educational achievement is a student's social class. Inequities were made very visible during the COVID-19 situation. What do we do with our kids? They don't have electronics. They don't have internet at home. How do we do distance learning? It's sad, and the kids see it. They're seeing what these other kids have, and they don't understand it. Some of Oklahoma's rural districts, one of their solutions to try to offset the lack of funding was to cut school from 5 days a week to 4 days a week. It should never be something that anybody ever should have had to consider. When you look at who's disproportionately poor in the United States, it's usually people of color. Inequality in education directly affects the income.
Still, today in America, children who are born into poverty are half as likely to graduate high school as their peers in other communities. Those who do graduate have, on average, an 8th grade skill level. We call this injustice educational inequity. Our leaders have long recognized that we simply have to correct it, but in our zeal to solve the problem quickly, we have often oversimplified both the causes and the solutions. There have been breakthroughs. One class would separate from the pack. Most people saw these as exceptions, the product of charisma, one-off miracles. It turns out they weren't miracles at all. Today, a growing number of extraordinarily successful classrooms and schools are putting their students on a completely different trajectory. We still need to improve urban and rural economies and strengthen social services, but successful teachers and schools are showing us we don't need to wait for that to happen. Instead, we can and must embrace a new mandate for public schools in economically disadvantaged communities to provide transformational education. Education that fundamentally alters students' academic and life prospects. Now the task is to bring success to millions more children across whole districts. There's reason for optimism. Today we see evidence of substantial progress in places many had given up on. Places like New York City, Washington, D.C., New Orleans, and the Rio Grande Valley in Texas. There's nothing elusive about what it takes to provide a transformational education. It requires the same ingredients as great accomplishment in any endeavor. Embracing an ambitious vision, in this case a vision of academic excellence. Developing extraordinary teams. Building a powerful culture of achievement. Effective management that fosters results orientation and continuous improvement. And a willingness to do whatever it takes, including providing students who all face extra challenges with extra time and extra support. There is nothing easy about this. To scale success, we need an all-out effort to build the capacity of our education system. We need to change policy to make this easier. We need innovation to make the work more scalable. Fueling these efforts will take transformational leaders working inside and outside of education. People with the conviction, insight, and credibility that most often comes from teaching successfully in low-income communities. Together, we can accomplish something unprecedented in the history of our nation and the world. We can provide children born into poverty with an education that transforms their life prospects. Together, we can unleash the potential of our urban and rural children to make history.
With my young men, like, I always share stories like about like my upbringing and like about my brother, and like I love him to death. He's so intelligent, so smart, but in school he will always get in trouble to the point where they will put him in the special education program. Teaching, and I see a lot of my African American boys being put into the SPED department. See a lot of them get kicked out of school. It breaks my heart because every time I see one of my students leave, I think of my brother, and I feel like I have to like do everything I could possibly do now so like they don't get to like that ending. It's like I want so much for my kids, and I have to do whatever I can, whatever it takes to make sure that they leave 5th grade believing in themselves. All of them look at me like as like, you give us hope that we can do this. Despite anything that's going on in my life, like I can achieve any goal that I can because you did it. That makes me feel like I'm doing this work and like they are seeing like my intent and like why I do it.
Sometimes it feels lonely being part of the 2% of Black men who teach in America. I was a core member in 2010 in the DC region. I'm from York, Alabama, a small town in the rural South. I chose to get into education because of where I'm from. A government study called it home to the richest soil and the poorest people. Growing up, we went to our local school. It was 100% Black. A lot of us were low income, and you sort of just had a feeling sort of like, yeah, I know this isn't right. Since most of the students that we teach are students of color, it's really important that the teachers reflect them, because it's really important to be able to see what you can be one day. It's hard to imagine something that you don't see. So I think it's important to see people of color leading classrooms so that students of color might decide that they want to lead classrooms too.
I think sometimes as teachers we put in everything and then we still come up short. And it hurts too when you both see students struggling, yourself struggling. You can have grace in one moment and you can do something extraordinary in one moment for one kid. It can be simple and it can be profound and it can last a lifetime. But to do that consistently, day in, day out, is really difficult. Grit and zeal and joy and persistence is what matters more than these fine data points. But I'm not satisfied until every kid in the room has made a profound connection, like with the class material and with who they are as a person. If my kids are just breathing in what we're learning about and internalizing it on a really deep emotional level, then it's joy.
My students recognized me as someone that didn't look like them, but also someone that didn't look like a lot of their other teachers. And for some of my students, I was the first strong relationship that they had with someone who identified as Asian American. What I found was that having those conversations and being a little raw and open myself built so much trust. If someone is willing to have these conversations and be really vulnerable, then I can give that back too. And it turned into this really incredible situation of reciprocity where students felt comfortable sharing their experiences that were similar to mine, that were different to mine, both in the realm of person as well as in the realm of academics. To shift that culture around where we're talking about things that are vulnerable and being able to articulate, this is hard for me and this is why, I need help, can you provide that? Was not always a culture that existed, and I'd like to believe that talking about me as a human and not just me as a teacher contributed to that.